tales in a digital sway.
Okay, let's unpack this. If you work with data, especially that really rich, nuanced stuff like interviews or maybe open-ended survey responses, you know the feeling, right?
Oh, absolutely. You're just surrounded by potentially fascinating insights, but the sheer volume, it can feel overwhelming.
Totally. And traditionally, making sense of all that qualitative information, it's relied so heavily on coding.
Right, coding. It's really the bedrock for so many qualitative researchers. It's where you immerse yourself, find patterns, themes, concepts, and you systematically label bits of text.
And it's iterative, interpretive, and incredibly demanding.
Yeah, demanding is the word. Both time and, honestly, cognitive energy.
It really is. Hours, days, sometimes meticulously going through every word, tagging, refining codes. It does build this deep connection with the data, no doubt.
But it can be slow, really slow, especially if you've got larger data sets.
And now, of course, the big change. Large language models, generative AI, they're entering the picture, promising to streamline things.
And this is where, we need to tread a bit carefully. Because a lot of the initial ways people are using AI in qualitative analysis, especially if they're coming from, say, computer science, they tend to reduce the task to what our source for this deep dive calls classification proxies.
Classification proxies. Okay, what does that distinction actually mean? Why isn't that, deep qualitative analysis?
Yeah. Well, because they often treat this really rich, complex data as just text. Text to be segmented and basically dumped into a few predefined buckets, usually a very small number.
How small?
We see examples in the source, someone using ChatGPT to code over 200 passages with just 9 codes. 9.
Wow.
Or another study applying 9 categories to survey responses. It's essentially labeling. It just lacks the interpretive depth, the context, the nuance. I mean, a human researcher might develop hundreds, sometimes thousands of codes to really capture what's going on.
So instead of letting the structure emerge from the data through that deep engagement.
Exactly. They're applying this limited, predefined structure to the data. It's kind of an engineering mindset maybe applied to interpretive work.
Right.
They simplify the task to fit what the AI is good at right now, pattern matching, labeling, rather than, adapting the AI to what rigorous qualitative interpretation actually needs.
And the models themselves have limitations.
Yeah, definitely. They can be context blind across big documents. Reproducibility can be an issue. They might even hallucinate or just smooth over all the interesting rough edges.
Okay, and this is precisely the point that the article we're diving into today really tackles head on. It's by Dr. Susanne Friese, and it makes you ask, is traditional coding even necessary anymore if we use these new AI tools differently?
It's a really fascinating question she poses. Dr. Friese introduces this novel framework. She calls it conversational analysis to the power of AI, or CAI for short.
CAI. Okay, so what's the big idea? What's the shift? If we're not coding, what are we doing?
The fundamental shift is this. Replace the act of coding, that segment-by-segment labeling, with a structured, iterative dialogue between you, the researcher, and a large language model about the data. Understanding doesn't come from sticking labels on things. It emerges through layered exploration, through synthesis that happens in conversation.
Interesting. So the AI becomes less like a coding machine and more like a thinking partner, a co-analyst.
Precisely. A thinking partner is a great way to put it. It's grounded in a hermeneutic approach, the idea that knowledge is constructed through interpretation, through dialogue.
Okay.
CAI still emphasizes rigor, methodological rigor, but that rigor comes from the structure of the conversation you designed, the intentionality of your questions, and how you weave in different kinds of reasoning, inductive, deductive, and importantly, abductive reasoning.
Abductive reasoning. Remind me, that's like finding the best explanation for something puzzling, forming hypotheses.
Yes, exactly. It's often called inference to the best explanation. It's that creative exploratory leap. And the CAI framework sees the AI as a potentially powerful catalyst for that kind of thinking.
So the goal isn't just description, it's deeper interpretation.
Deepening interpretation, expanding your analytical horizons, using the AI as a co-analyst, but, and this is key, always under your expert guidance. Meaningful use requires that dialogic interaction, theoretical framing, and your critical engagement.
This sounds, fundamentally different from just prompting a generic chatbot to summarize my interviews or something.
Oh, completely different.
How does it actually look in practice? What's the process Dr. Friese outlines?
She lays out a 5-step journey. The 5th step is optional, but it can really elevate things.
Okay, let's walk through them. Step 1.
Step 1 is getting to know the data. Basically, initial orientation. You use the AI assistant to generate summaries, maybe pull out some preliminary themes across your data set or just parts of it.
Just to get your bearings.
Exactly, like getting a quick AI-assisted overview. The source used an example about impulse buying the AI might surface initial themes like seeking approval and validation through purchase. Gives you a starting point.
Right, a high-level map. Then step 2.
Preparing for analysis. Now, this step is absolutely critical. This is where your expertise as the researcher is non-negotiable.
Okay.
Based on that initial look and your own research questions, you pick a specific topic or area to focus on, and you carefully, meticulously develop a set of exploratory questions. These questions will guide your whole dialogue with the AI.
So this isn't just asking the AI, tell me about my data. You're actively designing the analysis through the questions you ask.
Precisely. The source really stresses this. You, the researcher, formulate the specific questions. That's what makes the whole process transparent and potentially replicable later. That question set becomes your analytical tool, kind of like how a coding frame works in traditional analysis.
Makes sense. Can you give an example using that impulse buying data again?
Sure. So instead of just tell me about impulse buys, your questions might be super specific, like what underlying reasons do respondents explicitly give for purchases they later regretted? Or can you describe the emotional arc people seem to experience from thinking about it to buying to reflecting afterwards?
Okay, much more targeted.
Or maybe, in what ways do respondents talk about social expectations or comparing themselves to others influencing their impulse buys? Yeah, very directed questions.
Yeah, that gives the AI a clear job to do linked to your goals. Okay, so you've got your data subset, you've crafted these questions. Step 3 is
asking questions. This is the core dialogue part. You feed the AI your data or point it to the data, and you start asking those questions you prepared.
And you mentioned working with subsets of data.
Yes, that's a key recommendation, especially with current LLMs.
Yeah.
Start focused. Maybe 4 to 6 interviews, rarely more than 10 at a time.
Why the small subset? What's the reasoning there?
Well, if you give LLMs too much data at once, they tend to generalize or just give you high-level summaries. They can lose the nuance. Working with smaller chunks helps keep the AI's responses really grounded in the specifics of the data you're actually talking about right then.
Got it. And the AI gives an answer, and that's it.
Oh no, far from it. The AI's response is really just the opening move for your next question. It's a back and forth. You might say, okay, AI, you highlighted this point, but what about participant X? They seem to say the opposite. Can you compare their responses directly?
Ah, so you're probing deeper.
Exactly. Or you mentioned emotions. Can you elaborate on the transition between feelings during that purchase process based on what people said? This is where you weave in that inductive, deductive, and especially the abductive reasoning, exploring those whys.
And how does the AI help with the abductive part, generating those plausible explanations for tricky bits?
Yeah, this is where it can really shine as that creative company partner. If you hit a puzzling pattern, or maybe the AI surfaces an anomaly, something that doesn't quite fit, you can pause the description and ask the AI to help brainstorm why it might be happening. You could ask, okay, participant Y said this, which seems unusual compared to the others. Based on everything we've discussed, what are some possible interpretations or underlying factors that might explain this difference?
And the AI can draw on its training.
Yes, it can leverage its vast training data to suggest potential concepts, maybe related theories, or just different angles you hadn't considered. It prompts you to think in new directions, to explore hypotheses.
That sounds incredibly useful for sparking new insights. Okay, so you have this potentially quite long dialogue. Step 4 must be about making sense of it all.
Yes, synthesizing insights. And you're right, the AI can generate a lot of text. The example in the article exploring 3 types of shoppers generated over 30 pages of conversation output.
Whoa.
So step 4 is where you slow down, take a breath, and really engage deeply with that dialogue.
How do you tackle that? Just read through 30 pages?
You certainly read and reflect, maybe take notes.
Yeah.
But the article suggests something more powerful. You can actually upload that entire conversation itself back into the AI assistant.
Okay.
And co-develop the synthesis narrative with the AI.
Code develop. How does that work without the AI just, writing it for you? How do you stay in control?
You remain the conductor, the director. You tell the AI what you want to emphasize from the conversation. Which themes are most critical? What analytical lens should we use now? How should the narrative of the findings be structured?
So you're guiding it constantly.
Constantly. The AI helps by maybe reformulating sections, recombining points based on your instructions, drafting paragraphs. But you are the one evaluating every single piece. You accept, you reject, you revise, you rewrite.
Got it. So the insight isn't generated by the AI, and it's not purely by you in isolation. It's in the interaction.
Exactly. The source calls it an epistemic choreography. Knowledge emerges from the interplay, the dance between three agents, the data itself, the AI model, and you, the researcher. And you're leading the dance.
I like that metaphor.
And the output can be really rich. Look at table 1 in the source, the comparative table of shopper types, utilitarian, compensatory, addicted shoppers. It shows these distinct emotional drivers, different social influences. That kind of nuanced comparison comes out of this guided co-development.
That table really does show impressive depth. And Dr. Friese's reflection, comparing the CAAI process on just 9 interviews to her manually coding 57 interviews decades ago.
It's quite a statement, isn't it? She suggests the CAAI analysis on fewer interviews would likely be more thorough, more insightful, and considerably richer and deeper, and all within a significantly shorter time frame.
Deeper and faster. That's the potential promise.
It suggests that, yeah. And crucially, it's iterative. As you synthesize in step 4, new questions might pop up. You might realize you need to refine your inquiry, which loops you back to step 2 or 3.
Right. And then there's the optional step 5.
Yes, elevating the analysis. This is about moving beyond description towards higher-level abstraction, maybe even theory building.
How does the AI help there?
You can use it to help spot relationships between the insights you've synthesized. You could brainstorm theoretical connections with it, or even test your interpretations against established theories.
So I could literally ask, based on these findings about shopper regret, how might this relate to cognitive dissonance theory?
Exactly that. Or you could feed it the basics of a theory and ask, where does my data seem to align with this theory and where does it conflict? But again, you ensure what the article calls theoretical pervasiveness, that ongoing dynamic conversation between your data and relevant theory. The AI facilitates, you guide.
This whole process sounds incredibly powerful, but it also really feels like you'd need a specific tool, right? Not just pasting interview text into a general purpose chatbot. You'd need something designed for this kind of structured, careful dialogue.
Absolutely would. And you've hit on a key point. This is precisely where the QInsights.ai app comes into the picture, which is mentioned in the source. It's an AI-powered tool that's developed specifically to enable this CAII framework.
Ah, okay. So this isn't just a theoretical paper floating out there. There's a practical tool built around these very ideas.
That's exactly right. Dr. Susanne Friese, the author of the article we're discussing, she's been working on refining these concepts for about 2 years now. And all those learnings, all that thinking about methodology, the importance of dialogue, what actually constitutes rigorous AI-assisted analysis, all of that went directly into building the QInsights.ai app.
And I gather the underlying philosophy of the app is crucial here. It's not designed to be some kind of magic black box that just automates the whole analysis for you.
No, absolutely not. That's a critical point, and it directly reflects Dr. Friese's ethical stance and the very core of the CAAI approach itself. It is not a one-click app where the LLM just does everything automatically behind the scenes.
Okay.
The entire app is built on the philosophy that good quality, insightful qualitative work can only really come from the interaction, from the collaboration between the human researcher and the AI assistant.
So collaboration is the key.
It really, really is. And honestly, that interaction, that back and forth, that's also where the magic lies, you could say, or whatever you want to call that synergy that happens. It's that combination of your human interpretive skills, your theoretical background, your deep understanding of the context, combined with the AI's ability to rapidly process text, retrieve specific information from your data, identify patterns you might miss, and act as this incredibly responsive sounding board for your ideas.
Okay, so if collaboration is key, how does a dedicated tool like QInsights actually support the rigor and transparency that this whole dialogic approach demands?
Well, purpose-built tools can incorporate features that general chatbots just don't have. For instance, QInsights uses what's called a RAG architecture, Retrieval Augmented Generation.
RAG. Okay, what does that mean in practice?
It means that when the AI assistant responds to your question, it's actively retrieving relevant passages directly from your own uploaded data, your interviews, your documents.
Ah, so it's grounding its answers in my specific source material.
Precisely. It bases its answer on that retrieved information. This massively reduces the risk of the AI just making things up hallucinating, and it hugely enhances traceability. Often, you can literally see which specific quote or section of text informed the AI's response. Figure 5 in the source actually illustrates this kind of validation feature, showing the link back to the source text.
That traceability sounds crucial for trusting the output, especially with sensitive data. What about data security itself?
That's another major advantage of dedicated platforms over general consumer tools. With something like Q Insights, your data is processed on designated secure servers. User data is kept strictly separate, and maybe most importantly for researchers. Your specific data is not used to train the underlying AI models. That adds a big layer of ethical trustworthiness.
Good to know. And transparency, that's always huge in qualitative research. How does CAAI and a tool like Q Insights deliver on transparency?
Remember, the core idea of CAAI is the dialogue itself. Well, a tool like Q Insights automatically documents that entire dialogic interaction. It creates a chat protocol, kind of like what you see in Figure 3 in the source.
So it logs everything.
Every question you ask the AI, every response the AI gives, potentially any notes or reflections you type in during the process, it's all recorded chronologically. This provides a clear, transparent audit trail of your entire analytical journey, showing exactly how you arrived at your interpretations.
Okay, so instead of showing your coding frame and maybe some intercoder reliability stats,
Right.
you'd show this documented conversation as evidence of your analytical process.
Exactly. It shifts where the rigor is demonstrated.
Yeah.
Rigor isn't just about agreeing on labels anymore. It emerges from the thoughtfulness and intentionality of your question design. The question set effectively becomes the equivalent of a coding frame and the documented process of exploration and synthesis.
So how do you demonstrate reliability or trustworthiness without those traditional coding metrics?
The source outlines ways to adapt these concepts. For what you might call cross-person reliability, you could have two researchers start with the exact same set of carefully crafted questions. They then independently engage in the dialogue with the AI using the same data, independently synthesize their findings based on those dialogues,
And then compare.
and then compare and discuss their resulting interpretations and the dialogue process itself. It becomes about aligning interpretations through structured conversation and the shared evidence of the chat protocols, not just agreeing on code application.
Okay. And for a solo researcher, how do they check consistency?
That would be temporal reliability. A solo researcher could repeat the analytic sequence after a certain interval, use the exact same question set with the AI on the same data subset, synthesize again, and compare their interpretations and the AI's responses over time.
I see.
And this is where having a dedicated platform helps too, because you can often control settings like the AI's temperature. Lower temperature generally means more consistent, less creative outputs, which aids reproducibility for this kind of check.
So the CAI quality strategy table in the source, table 1, it basically summarizes this. Traceability through RAG, transparency through the protocols, reliability and rigor via the question design and reapplication, and reflexivity through that constant engagement.
Exactly. It shows that rigor isn't being thrown out. It's just being rethought and adapted for this new dialogic reality.
Makes sense. But this shift does bring up ethical questions, especially around authorship. If the AI is helping draft the synthesis, who's the actual author of the final analysis?
Yeah, that's a really important question. The article takes a very clear stance here.
Yeah.
The researcher remains the primary author.
Okay.
The AI is an incredibly powerful assistant, yes, but you are the one steering the ship. You guide the inquiry, you make the critical interpretive judgments, you decide what's relevant, what needs emphasis, which theoretical lens to apply. Ultimately, you decide what the findings mean. Authorship rests with the person making those crucial intellectual decisions.
So it's about the intellectual control and the interpretive authority, not just who physically typed the words?
Precisely. Yeah. And alongside that comes the ethical imperative for transparency. You had to clearly disclose how you used AI in your methods section. Was it for summarizing, drafting synthesis, generating initial themes? Be upfront about it.
And be critical of the AI, too.
Absolutely. What the article calls epistemic humility. Always remember, the AI lacks real lived experience. It can inherit biases from its training data. It can hallucinate. You, the researcher, must critically interrogate everything it produces. The AI is a tool, a partner, not an oracle.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit then. If researchers start adopting the CAAI approach, moving away from traditional coding, what are the big gains, and are there potential losses?
The major gains seem to be a significant reorientation towards synthesis and deep interpretation. You spend less time on the often mechanical task of segmenting text, and more time on higher-level thinking, exploring connections, diving into nuances. There's potential to handle larger data sets more effectively, and certainly to generate really rich, detailed analyses much faster than purely manual methods allow. Plus, those dialogue protocols offer this whole new level of transparency into the interpretive process itself.
And on the flip side, what might researchers feel they're losing?
Well, some might genuinely miss that very hands-on, embodied sense of immersion that comes from manually coding every single line. There's a deep familiarity you build that way.
I can see that.
Collaborative analysis also shifts. Instead of comparing code applications, you're comparing interpretations derived from the same structured dialogue. That requires researchers to be really articulate about their interpretive reasoning. And while some quantification might still be possible, the heavy reliance on things like code counts or co-occurrence matrices might become less central, or at least look different.
So it sounds like it's not necessarily a universal replacement for coding in all situations, but maybe a distinct paradigm, a different way of knowing with its own strengths.
I think that's a good way to put it. It seems to resonate particularly strongly with interpretive research traditions that have always prioritized meaning-making and holistic understanding over just systematic segmentation. It fundamentally challenges the assumption that coding is the only pathway to rigorous qualitative interpretation.
It reframes knowing.
Yes, it positions knowing as something constructed through conversation, with the AI acting as that abductive catalyst, sparking new ideas, and the researcher firmly in the driver's seat as the analytic engine.
Okay, so to wrap this up then, Dr. Friese's CAAI framework, it really offers this genuinely new way to think about and do qualitative analysis, moving beyond coding towards this dynamic dialogic partnership with AI.
Exactly. It's a method that pushes the process towards synthesis and interpretation, building in transparency through the documented conversation, and arguing that rigor is maintained, maybe even enhanced, through really intentional question design and that critical human engagement.
And importantly, this isn't just the theory on paper. As we've discussed, this novel approach can actually be put into practice right now.
Yes, and tools like the QInsights.ai were specifically created to facilitate exactly this kind of structured dialogic analysis. It really embodies the author's philosophy that the true value, the real insight, comes from that intelligent interaction between the human researcher and the AI assistant, not from trying to automate the human out of the process.
A tool built for conversation, not just classification.
Not that the core idea.
This whole shift from coding segments to conducting conversations, it really does make you reconsider things, doesn't it? If you can navigate your complex data through guided dialogue, what new kinds of questions might you feel empowered to ask? Questions that maybe felt too overwhelming or too time-consuming to tackle with traditional coding methods.
Yeah.
What possibilities does this open up for your own research or just for how you understand complex human experiences captured in text?
It certainly opens up some exciting new avenues for exploration, I think.
It really does. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into what could be a truly transformative approach to qualitative analysis.
Let's dive in. Qualitative flow, leading the way. Discover the tales in a digital sway.